So how do we make the impossible feel possible to us? How do we believe something to be true or something is going to happen if we don't see the proof or evidence of it? How are we supposed to just have blind faith in something that we have never seen proof of before? These are all questions that I got asked this week, and they're all really important to address. And I figure it's time to make a video talking more about this, because I know that this is a struggle for many, many people, and it certainly was for me. It can be really difficult for us to suspend all disbelief and just purely trust that our desired outcome is going to happen. Because what this is going to do is help us to go even deeper in understanding why we struggle so hard to live in the end, to suspend that disbelief, and why this is so that we can ultimately overcome it. Because this really boils down to one of our greatest enemies when it comes to conscious manifestation. So if you are having struggle manifesting your desire, if you are not seeing movement in the 3D, if perhaps you have been doing this for a while and you are getting frustrated, not seeing results, stick around because this video is definitely for you. By the way, hi, I'm Missy Renee, and on this channel we talk all things manifestation and the law of assumption. So if those are topics that you want to learn more about, then definitely be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for notifications, and if you enjoy these videos, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you are interested in any of my resources, such as my coaching programs, my courses and workshops, I have all of those links down in the description box below, so definitely be sure to check those out. So let's go ahead and dive right into it, because we got a lot of things to talk about. How are we expected to make the impossible feel possible for us? What we want to ultimately remember is this. Here's the secret. We're not being asked to believe in this thing happening in the 3D. We're not being asked to trust that this is going to happen. None of that is a requirement or a prerequisite to consciously manifest. We are not being asked to make the impossible possible in the 3D. We're asked to go there in imagination. We're asked to make that impossible scenario possible for us in imagination. Because once again, imagination is limitless. There are no barriers, there are no obstacles, there are no hoops that we have to jump through. We don't have to make anybody do anything in imagination. The only barriers we face in imagination are the ones that are self-imposed. And if they're self-imposed barriers, we can ultimately remove those, no matter what. But the truth is, we get stuck in the 3D due to logic and reason. These self-perceived barriers in imagination are due to the logic and rational mind. And this is our greatest enemy when it comes to conscious manifestation. Because it's reason that asks the questions of, well, how is this going to happen? That's not possible for you. You're being delusional. You're being unrealistic. Just give up already. All of that inner talk, all of those thoughts that flood in when we are aiming to manifest something that is impossible, all of that is stemming from the voice of reason. And what that does, what that is doing is it is creating those restrictions in our imagination. It is giving us the perception that we are unable to imagine something that doesn't feel real to us by the physical senses. And if we are bringing that logic and reason and the 3D limitations with us into imagination, that is how we remain stuck. That is how we create this perceived barrier, this illusion of separation, and keep ourselves from truly going there and experience what we desire in imagination. And if we continue to use the logic and reason of the 3D and bring that with us into imagination, that is only going to keep us double-minded. That is only going to keep us in purgatory. It's going to make it so that we are not able to enter the kingdom of heaven. And ultimately why we're not seeing any movement in the 3D. It really does boil down to that. What we have to remember and continue to go back to is that we're not being asked to know the how. We're not being asked to have it all figured out. We're not being asked to believe that what we're imagining is possible for us. And if we're going in with this mentality, we're going to continue to find ourselves stuck over and over again. All we are being asked to do is to not restrict ourselves, not limit ourselves in imagination. All that we are asked is that we go to that place, we construct that space in our mind that would imply it is already done. And we can do that at any time. Now, I can already hear some of you say, but Missy, my mind is struggling to believe this. What do I do if my mind is not accepting this to be true? What if I can't just imagine the outcome? What do I do then? Well, what if I told you that this is something that we're always doing anyways? We are always, every day, imagining some kind of outcome that is perceived as going to happen despite having 3D proof of it. As I mentioned in my last video and videos before that, we're always living in the end of some form or another, in some way or another. We are always imagining or assuming that something is going to happen before it does. Sadly, for most people, we're in the habit of assuming the worst is going to happen. And an example that I like to use of this is one that many people can probably relate to. Perhaps there was a time in your life where somebody was lying to you, or what you perceived as somebody lying to you. Perhaps you suspected that somebody was lying or not being fully honest with themselves. And in that scenario, you may not have had any proof that they were lying. It could be that it was purely a hunch or an intuition. But regardless, you imagined something that felt so real, it felt so certain, despite the 3D proof. And if you've had this experience before, I am willing to bet money that that is ultimately what happened. You experienced what you were imagining, despite the 3D showing you that that was true. Living in the end and what you are imagining is something that you're doing all the time. We are just so accustomed to imagining a worst case scenario. Anytime that we are thinking worriedly about our SP and what are they up to, I bet they're dating somebody else, they probably don't even like me anyways. That is all an assumption. That is all hypothetical. We don't have proof of what somebody else is doing in the 3D, but we naturally assume it. We naturally assume that these things are real or going to happen without the 3D proof. And that's one of the points in my video that I'm trying to get across. This idea that we can't imagine a certain outcome. Because the irony is, we will be imagining something terrible and saying, oh God, this feels so real. Our body will react to it. We'll get anxious. We'll feel nervous about it. But on the other hand, imagining something lovely or an outcome that is desirable feels fake or like it's just imagination. In both of these scenarios, the unwanted hypothetical and the desirable hypothetical, both scenarios, both the undesirable outcome and the desirable outcome are just a hypothetical, but we give credence to what we don't want. We imagine something terrible and we react to it and it feels very real to us, but something desirable is just imagination and it's fake. And the reason that this undesirable outcome feels more real to us is because we're listening to that rational mind. We're listening to that logical mind that tries to make sense of the situation. And we're never going to be able to reason our way into the state of the wish fulfilled. The reason and logic of the 3D is what is keeping us prisoners to the 3D. It is what is creating that self-imposed boundary in imagination, so that when we try to imagine something lovely, our mind will immediately come back with, oh, that's not true, that's not possible, you can't have that, that's not going to happen, you're being delusional, and on and on. And that is why, in order to make the impossible possible, we have to drop the logic and reason. We have to drop this idea that because the 3D circumstances are a certain way, that we cannot imagine or that we cannot allow ourselves to go to the end. We cannot allow this rational mind to keep us in bondage, to keep us from that desire, that fulfillment, and the feeling of it is done. Because the truth is, and I'm going to say this a million times if I have to, Your imagination has no limits. The only limits are self-imposed. And if we continue to listen to that logic and reason, if we continue to listen to that inner critic that's telling us all these things about how unrealistic it is, then we're never going to see the change we desire. We are told repeatedly that we must deny the evidence of the senses. We must deny the logic based on the 3D circumstances. We have to drop that. Neville Goddard talks repeatedly about how we need to do so. If we are taking the 3D factors and using that to limit ourselves, we will not see any movement. We will not see anything progress other than the same old, same old. We have to remember that it is all ego at the end of the day. All of the logic and doubt is just ego. It is all the rational mind. In the Bible, Satan is a representation of our fears, doubt, and reason. And in the Bible, Satan disguises himself as the angel of light. It appears to be this loving, wonderful presence that is trying to help you and trying to aid you, but it is only keeping you stuck, and it is lying to you. Our reason and our logic feels like it's there to protect us. It feels like it's there to support us and keep us from harm's way. But what it's actually doing is keeping us firmly planted in the undesirable state without the ability to move. And I was certainly no different than most people who asked me this question. I certainly struggled with logic and reason for a long time. I went to school for engineering. I've always been much more of a left brain person, somebody who was constantly looking at reason and logic. I wanted things to make sense. I was always very practical in that way. And that is why trying to imagine something that was lovely and something that was bold felt very difficult for me to do. It felt very strange and almost uncomfortable because I was so accustomed to trying to be reasonable with myself, to be logical in what I was thinking and doing and feeling. And I constantly had that inner critic telling me that, oh, you can't do this. Oh, you can't do that. That's not possible. How's that going to work? I struggled with this for a very long time. The turning point for me was when I had the realization that in every moment I had a choice. I got to choose where I occupied and where I was dwelling internally on the inside. Regardless of the 3D circumstances, I always had a choice in each moment to imagine something lovely or to imagine something terrible and fearful. Regardless of the circumstances, I had the freedom and choice within me to imagine whatever I wanted. And that's what we have to realize, that regardless of what the 3D is showing you, regardless of how impossible it looks on the outside, you have a choice in every moment to go to somewhere lovely. We are boundless in imagination, and we must not ever forget that, because once again, what we imagine is what becomes our reality. Not what we desire, not what we hope is going to happen, not what we pray is going to happen, but what we imagine. So whatever we are imagining is what ultimately becomes what we are experiencing. But we have got to take off these shackles and chains that are keeping us in this undesirable state. And we have to learn to move and learn to be free in imagination. On the outside, it looked impossible. It looked like there was nothing I can do. I was completely unable to move. But on the inside, in imagination, I had the choice and the ability to imagine something different, always. And then the question becomes, well, what about for things that we haven't experienced in the 3D? How do we imagine something that we've never experienced before? How do we do that if I have nothing to go off of? And to that, I say, you always have the ability to create the idea of it. And what I mean by that is, even if there's a circumstance that you desire that you've never experienced before or anything like it, you can still imagine what that would be like for you. For example, if you wanted to manifest abundance, but you have never had more than 2 pennies to rub together in your life, How would you go about doing that? How could you possibly fathom what it would be like to be wealthy? Well, you could ask yourself, what would I be doing if I had all the money in the world? What would my day look like if I had all of the resources I needed and I was not limited by money? Would I have a nice house with a pool? Would I drive a new car? Would I move to my favorite city? Would I start up my own business? Would I start up a nonprofit organization for something that I am deeply passionate about? Would I travel the world and go see wonderful places that I've always wanted to visit? Would I give donations to my favorite causes? And we can take these ideas, we can take these things of what it would be like, and we can start to play. We can start to construct this world. We can start to construct this mental space and get ourselves familiar with what the state of abundance would look like for us. And that's the thing that we have to keep in mind, is that this is going to be different for everybody. No two people are going to have the exact same idea of what wealth means. For one person, $10,000 could be a drop in the bucket and won't really move the needle much. Whereas for somebody else, $10,000 is going to be a life-changing amount of money. It really depends on what you are imagining and what you allow yourself to assume. But regardless, you have the ability to assume. You have the ability to always imagine whatever you desire in every moment. And if you need more information and inspiration about imagination and how to really get those wheels going, you can check out the video that I made talking more about it. I'll link that guy up here and also down below. But we have this limitless faculty, and we can go anywhere and do anything at any time in our mind. We just need to allow ourselves to do so. One of the things that I've found on this journey is that one of the most difficult things in this life to do is to allow ourselves to experience what we want in our mind, which is crazy if you think about it, because the one place that we actually can have anything that we want, we don't let ourselves go there. We limit ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves to feel deeply or to imagine boldly. Far too often, we give ourselves excuses as to why we can't imagine something, or why we cannot let ourselves get lost in a desire in our mind. And we need to start asking ourselves, why? Why can't I go here in imagination? Why do this? What on earth do we have to gain by continuing to restrict ourselves and only imagine things that are terrible? What do we truly get by keeping ourselves so small in our mind? And the answer to that is nothing but more of the same old, same old. So we have to give ourselves permission, first and foremost, to imagine boldly and to go bigger in our mind. If we continue to live small and limit ourselves, that is going to be the extent of what we experience in the 3D. And here is a lovely quote from Neville to help to really drive this home. Man is only reacting in his natural or Satan state. He never acts or creates. He only reacts or recreates. One real creative moment, one real feeling of the wish fulfilled, is worth more than the whole natural life of reaction. And we must remember the importance of this. We have to remember to not continue to react and recreate more of the same old, which is what is perpetually keeping us from manifesting our desire. Logic and reason are only ever going to keep you in bondage. They're only going to keep you firmly tethered to what you don't want. So we have to go bigger here. We have to be much larger than what the 3D perception and what the 3D senses are telling us. Go bolder with that feeling in your mind. Chances are that you're truly not giving yourself that feeling of the wish fulfilled and that satisfaction, because to you it feels impossible. And to that I say, screw that. Forget all of that and do it anyways. All things are possible in imagination, and what we imagine is what creates our reality. That is what becomes our 3D experience. So going forward, do not limit yourself to what you perceive as possible or rational. Do not continue to limit yourself and restrict yourself and deny occupancy of the wish fulfilled. Your imagination is the kingdom of heaven. That is your kingdom. That is all your territory. It is within you. It belongs to you. And you are always free to do so, no matter what. And once we do this, once we understand that nothing is impossible to us in imagination, once we understand that the only limitations are the self-imposed limitations of reason and logic, once we drop all of that and completely surrender to that feeling of the wish fulfilled, that is how you ultimately manifest whatever the hell you want. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope this is helpful, making the impossible possible to you. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you are interested in checking out any of my other resources, I will have links down below to my coaching programs, my workshops and courses, my blog, my social channels. Got a ton of great stuff in the description box, so don't forget to check it out. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on this channel. Don't forget to check out my Manifestation Fundamentals playlist. Each video is a different topic, but it all pertains in how to manifest the best life ever. So until we meet again, you guys, as always, please take care, be well, and never forget how powerful you truly are. Happy manifesting, guys.